You would think that every truck Monster Jam comes up with would be promoted and utilized well on their roster. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. There have been many trucks that have been at the arsenal of Monster Jam and used so inconsistently, it's not even funny. With that in mind, this list contains 10 of these trucks that were rarely run, were short-lived, or some that ultimately served no purpose whatsoever. So with that being said, here are the top 10 most underutilized trucks in Monster Jam. Number 10, Bro Camino. Bro Camino was a short-lived truck that debuted in the 2020 Monster Jam season. It would be the alter ego to Brodozer, though it did not share the diesel engine and rather a standard methanol engine. Like Brodozer, it was based on their orange El Camino that was featured on the Diesel Brothers TV show. At the All-Star Challenge in 2019, it was announced that it would become a real-life truck the following season. It would run on Stadium Championship Series Green and driven by both Diesel Dave and Cam McQueen, the latter of which arguably had the most memorable moments driving the truck. It would only run for 3 months, since the pandemic put an end to the season and the contract between the Diesel Brothers and Monster Jam was not renewed following the 2020 season, though its final appearance alongside Brodozer would be seen at the Breaking World Records event where the two faced off in a drag race in which Bro Camino would win. The only reason this isn't higher on this list is due to the truck's short-lived life and it not being continued due to the contract not being renewed. Number 9, Kawasaki. Kawasaki Terryx KRX 1000, or Kawasaki for simplicity's sake, is a largely forgotten truck that only existed for 3 years. Originally debuting in 2019 on the Monster Jam stunt truck chassis, it was used to promote the UTV of the same name. At Anaheim 2020 Show 4, the truck would appear again, this time on a CRD chassis. Then, a year later, it would appear again in 2021 at Indianapolis Show 2, where it would actually get its first and final stint competing for one race. 7-time AMA Supercross champion Jeremy McGrath would drive the truck in what has to be the most anticlimactic debut of all time. Well, other than Adam Anderson in Taz, but we don't need to talk about that. Anyway, after the disappointing rollover, Kawasaki has never been seen since. It's probably not all that bad that it rolled over, since I can't imagine the truck doing anything else after that race. I will say though, if they had have kept the truck going to replace Monster Energy once the truck left the sport at the end of 2021, I think that would have been really cool to see take over the mantle. But I digress. Number 8, Man of Steel. Man of Steel was an unfortunately very short-lived truck that only ran for a single year. It was based off the movie released in 2013 of the same name, and was essentially the successor to that of Superman. However, it would never live up to the legacy that the Superman monster truck gave to fans. It would debut in 2014 under the former Superman driver Joey Parnell, driving the truck for Randy Brown's team and campaigning the truck at various arena events across the first quarter. The truck would compete at Monster Jam World Finals 15 with team owner Randy Brown driving the truck. Following the truck's World Finals appearance, it would compete at some international events later that year. Due to DC's contract not being renewed for 2015, it would be retired along with the other DC superhero trucks. What's even more bizarre is the fact that the original render showed the truck with a Ford F-150 body, and the diecast line for Monster Jam had a removable cape for the truck, which was not on the original truck. In addition to that, Superman was brought back for a final event in Saudi Arabia in 2017, but was retired afterwards. Man of Steel is an intriguing truck that was certainly underutilized, which is why it makes our list. Number 7, Monster Mutt Junkyard Dog. Arguably one of the most popular Monster Mutt trucks, aside from the original version with the Mercury body, Monster Mutt Junkyard Dog was another short-lived truck that proved to be a fan favorite among spectators. 2016 would see all Monster Mutts convert from the iconic Mercury bodies with poor visibility to the more marketable and fresh 3D bodies that Rottweiler had been using for the past 2 years. Junkyard Dog, however, appealed to the fans who loved the original look of the truck by offering up a new theme. It was designed around a dog who was living amongst a junkyard, with grey patches on its body and tears in the tail and its ears. It would compete on the 2016 Fox Sports 1 Championship Series with Dustin Brown behind the wheel, and would also be invited to compete at Master Jam World Finals 17. Afterwards, it would compete in just 2 more shows, Evansville and Ocala, before it was ultimately retired. Its body got increasingly rougher as the year went on, though it did kind of add to its character, since the character of the truck was living amongst a junkyard. Monster Mutt Junkyard Dog is also recognized to be the second most short-lived truck in Monster Jam, obviously excluding the one-time trucks. Its popularity is still strong even today, and fans would love to see it back on the track, but it will likely stay retired for the foreseeable future. Number 6, Hulk/Thor. This spot on the list contains 2 trucks, and both were so similar that I thought it was reasonable to combine both of them on the list. Hulk and Thor were 2 trucks that debuted in late 2012 on the international tour. Both trucks would compete across Europe in 2012, 2013, and 2014, with the 2 making their only United States stops at World Finals 15 for the Racing Championship Encore. Interestingly, Hulk was originally supposed to debut within the first wave of Marvel trucks in 2001, but for whatever reason, never came to fruition. Hulk shared the same Mercury body as Monster Mutt, a design choice that went on to ironically create Monster Mutt. Thor and Hulk's most prominent appearance outside of the World Finals Encore was being part of the 2012 Team Marvel vs Team Destruction events in Arnhem, Netherlands, which was broadcasted to Speed TV. They would also participate in the same Team Marvel and Team Destruction events in 2013 and 2014, though these were not televised. For fans in the United States, many wish they got to see these 2 trucks compete outside of the World Finals Encore. They may get their wish in some sort of capacity, with Thor being revitalized, albeit with a new body, and Hulk nowhere to be seen. The idea may not be completely off the table yet. Still, the original versions have been grossly underutilized, especially with them being limited to Europe for basically its entire lifespan, which makes them perfect for this list. Number 5, Radical Rescue. 2002 saw the debut of many iconic trucks, but it also saw the debut of a relatively forgotten truck known as Radical Rescue. Its bright red paint scheme adorning a 1955 Chevrolet Camino body with a siren on the roof made it one of the most eye-catching trucks on the circuit at that time. However, despite its appearance, it was never shown on television, and the only reason for fans really remembering it was due to its appearances on the Crash Madness 3 DVD. While it did compete frequently in 2002 and 2003 before being retired in 2004, the fact that it was never shown on TV and merchandising involving the truck was almost non-existent begs the question as to why it even existed. The truck was a last-minute redo of what was meant to be Junkyard Dog, not to be confused with the Monster Mutt version, though that was partly inspired by this Junkyard Dog concept. The truck was a tribute to those lost on September 11th, 2001, but it's strange that a truck with its message and unique design was barely promoted at all. In saying that, as we discussed in our top 10 concepts video, it was revitalized 15 years later in Hot Wheels' diecast line, as well as Spin Masters, when they took over after Hot Wheels, with the truck's trademark being brought out by Mike Harper and him debuting his own interpretation earlier this year. Radical Rescue was such a cool and quirky truck, and it's such a huge shame that it wasn't used more. Number 4, Wonder Woman. Yet another superhero truck. Wonder Woman arguably was utilized less despite being heavily promoted at first. Truck would be unveiled at 2017's Monster Jam World Finals during the pit party and was set to debut later that year. At Foxborough, Lindsay Reed drove the truck in its competition debut, where she performed pretty well. She would drive it for the rest of the year, as the truck would be featured in every single United States stadium event after Foxborough. Meanwhile, a second Wonder Woman would be campaigned for the Australian tour, which featured Australia's first ever Monster Jam driver, Rihanna Buchanan, drive the truck for the duration of the tour. For 2018, newcomer Colette Davis would drive the truck on Triple Threat East and was also invited to compete in the Double Down Showdown at the World Finals. However, it was after the World Finals where the truck would be utilized less and less. Wonder Woman appeared in only 5 arena events post-World Finals, which coincidentally became the last 5 shows that Colette Davis competed on before she retired. As well as this, Wonder Woman was completely absent from stadiums in the United States, both before and after the World Finals. On the overseas tour, it would compete in just 4 events, 3 of which were the Australian tour, and also again, ironically, were the last 3 shows that Rihanna Buchanan would ever drive a monster truck in. The 4th event was at San Jose, Costa Rica, where Becky McDonough would drive the truck. In 2019, the truck was not only again absent from stadiums, but also arenas. It would be driven exclusively at international events and driven by Haley Gorley, and for 2 shows by Brianna Mahan. Those international events were the United Kingdom tour, featuring Coventry and Manchester, Cardiff, Wales, Gothenburg, Sweden, Antwerp, Belgium, Tokyo, Japan, and Singapore, with Singapore marking the final event for the Wonder Woman truck. With Monster Jam having a DC contract for merchandising, Wonder Woman has made frequent appearances in diecast releases since the truck has retired, but I'm absolutely astounded that Wonder Woman went from being featured in every single stadium lineup after its debut in Foxborough to being relegated to the international tour, or as some call it, the retirement tour. Wonder Woman was such a sleek truck, and I'm glad that I got to see it. But I know there were many American fans who never got to see this truck and were wishing that it was used more after its debut year. Number 3, Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath has had a tumultuous history, as many of you probably already know. It was previously known as Spitfire. After a legal dispute over the name, just 3 years later it was renamed to Dragon's Breath and debuted with Becky McDonough behind the wheel. It would only make 1 televised appearance that year, being featured at Detroit, though she was featured in many stadium events that year and a few arenas. But after the World Finals, the truck was nowhere to be seen. Becky would move to El Toro Loco in 2012, and the truck would be shelved for the rest of the season, along with all of the 2013 season. It wasn't until 2014 came around where Monster Jam announced their newest truck, Dragon. With the body not being finished in time for the new season, Dragon's Breath was brought back, with Scott Liddycoat campaigning the truck while Dragon was being completed. He did get to campaign the truck in stadiums and arenas like McDonough did, even getting to drive the truck in the Young Gun Shootout in 2014. However, after the World Finals, Dragon's Breath was completely retired due to Dragon essentially replacing it. Dragon's Breath seemed doomed from the beginning. Its encore performance when it was known as Spitfire was not entirely memorable, let alone was it even shown on TV. Of course, its original name was another factor, and with it being on television a total of 2 times, Detroit 2011 and the World Finals 15 Young Gun Shootout, and it being replaced by the more marketable Dragon truck was just another reason as to why Dragon's Breath, at least to me, never would have a chance to shine. Number 2, Backwards Bob. Backwards Bob has been notably utilized so little despite being such a memorable truck and a beloved name. Like Dragon's Breath's precursor, Spitfire, it debuted at Monster Jam World Finals 9. It would later be campaigned at various events in 2009, including 2 televised events by a driver who shall remain nameless. Arnhem would see the truck being campaigned by George Balhan. However, he would break his wrist, putting him out of commission for the rest of the weekend. That would see Gravedigger crew chief Dustin Brown step behind the wheel and drive the truck for the rest of the events. Following 2009, it was ran exclusively at Central America shows for the 2010 season, with Costa Rica seeing Dan Evans drive the truck and Panama featuring the debut of Barry Musawa. In 2011, it was run on Rick Swanson's Obsessed truck for the second Anaheim event of the year, though that was its only appearance for 2011. For the years 2012 to 2014, it was completely shelved. It wasn't until 2015 where the truck saw a return to competition, where both Ryan Huffaker and Brian Wright drove the truck at various arenas and stadiums for the first quarter. Wright would continue to drive the truck at both Hagerstown and Stafford Springs later that year, which were its final appearances for 2015. It would compete in its last season in 2016, where Kevin Crocker would drive the truck at various arena shows that year, as well as 2 speedway shows in Myrtle Beach and New Western Ohio. After these 2 events, the truck hasn't been seen in competition since. That hasn't stopped it from appearing in merchandise and video games such as Monster Jam Steel Titans 2, long after the truck has been retired. However, its utilization over the years has been nothing but disappointing. It has not run a full season in any capacity, and probably will never run a season ever again. Add to that the many issues it's been involved in, from a trailer fire that caused the truck to be run on a spare PEI chassis in 2015, to Kenneth Feld, the CEO of Feld Entertainment, allegedly disliking the truck and thinking the overall concept of the truck was too silly. Okay. Regardless as to whether or not that is true, Backwards Bob has been one of the most underutilized trucks, but it's not the most underutilized. Number 1, Advance Auto Parts Metal Monster. By far, easily the most underutilized truck is the Advance Auto Parts Metal Monster. A truck that I and many of you watching at home barely remember, and to be honest with you, it's for good reason. The truck never competed. Yes, you heard that correctly. So what was its purpose then? Well, it was basically just a display truck, or at least the name was. For its entire lifespan, it never had its own chassis, rather borrowing from other trucks solely during the pit parties. Afterwards, the chassis' regular identity would be returned and Metal Monster just existed. It is unknown as to why it never ran in competition, given that its spiritual successor, the Advance Auto Parts Grinder, arguably went on to become one of the faces of the sport during its time when Advance Auto Parts sponsored not just the truck, but the sport as a whole. It was such a cool looking truck, and a shame that it was utilized so poorly. At the end of the day, this video sends out an important message. Just because a truck is popular amongst fans doesn't mean it will be utilized well for however long it's around for. And well, that is all we have for you today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all soon with some more Monster Truck content.